I think we're going to get started because we're sort of a little behind. Just in case it wasn't clear from Mary Kate's explanation, all of the talks that are running right now are going to run 3 times. So we're going to stop this one at 10:15. The next one will start at 10:20, and so you can go wherever you want to, and then another one more after that. It's a fabulous choose your own adventure. Welcome to this Saturday morning. So my name is Natalie. I'm one of the Symposium team members here, and I'm going to be facilitating a little bit this conversation with Professor Akers, but we really will leave time for you all to ask questions as well. So Professor Akers is an assistant professor of geography and urban and regional studies at the University of Michigan-Dearborn, and he's also the director of the Urban Praxis Workshop. So if you have a place that you want to start out, you can feel free. Otherwise, I can ask you a question. But
I can give a quick,
yeah.
Why don't we give a quick presentation about what we're thinking about, what we're talking about, and what we're doing at the Urban Praxis Workshop, and then I'm going to skip over a bunch because we don't have a bunch of time. There's a ton of papers out there if you want. There's the Urban Praxis Workshop, and we have a couple of white papers that are a little more readable than the other academic papers, so if you prefer those, they're at the Poverty Solutions website. So quickly what I'll say is I've crossed out real estate here for property. That's more of what we cover and what we think about. Real estate is just one variation on property, right? It's a way that we buy, sell, exchange, and value property, but property itself is this kind of incredibly fictitious space that we create, and those boundaries have captured all of these different relationships, power, socioeconomic difference, all of those pieces. So when we're talking about property, right, it's the way in which we just take land and make it something that we can buy, sell, exchange, use, and live in. So that's number one, we deal with property. But I'm going to talk about where we're at in Detroit, particularly since the mortgage foreclosure crisis. So one of the things that we can see in the mortgage foreclosure crisis, and the number that's important here, is 160,000. We've had 160,000 homes go through either tax foreclosure or mortgage foreclosure, or subsequently go through tax foreclosure. Very few of them went through both. If we just do a simple grab and extrapolate from the average number of people in a household, the census, that's about 368,000 people that have experienced foreclosure in the city of Detroit since about 2008. Right? So a huge number of people. Now, what does that look like if we graph it out? How do people experience it? We think this is volume, we think this is time. What we see starting about 2006 is mortgage foreclosures going up like that. They peak in about 2010, and they start to go down. So that's here, and she knows this graph well, but then what we see here is in about 2010, we see rising steadily is tax foreclosure, right? Follows on. There's a couple things going on here. One, mortgage foreclosure crisis, people lose property, some go through both. We also have a financial crisis that follows on that. We lost over 1,000 tool and die manufacturers during that time, nearly 100,000 jobs in the city of Detroit, lots of people struggling to keep up. Also, the city of Detroit not changing their tax valuations and assessments, and people without jobs not being able to pay for it. At the same time this is going on, any kind of standard lending that you could think of getting in Detroit, whether that's your regular prime mortgage, subprime refinance, all of those collapsed, right? You can barely get it. There aren't many in it. The year that I got a mortgage in Detroit, there were about, 238 other people that got a mortgage. So what's going on there? What that means is most of the sales that are going between exchanging property are cash sales or land contracts. So what we see in Detroit, land contracts in Michigan have been a persistent thing. They've gone on for a long time. Incredibly malleable instrument. Great. You want to sell me a property? I want to buy it. You know what kind of income I have. We work it out. 5 years from now, I own the property. It works well. Right? Okay. But given that it's malleable, we can use it in a lot of other ways. You actually want to keep the property. You want to make it hard for me to get it, and you want to evict me as soon as I miss. Right? Those increase. So what we see is by 2013, sorry to pick on you just right here. 2013, these exceed all other types of lending and cash sales. All other types of lending combined and cash sales. At the same time, what we see in Detroit is a declining population, but an eviction rate that remains at the same total volume. So we have fewer people, but the same amount of evictions. So in fact, we have an increasing rate of evictions going on, in part related to this. Now, this seems like a lot to kind of talk about, particularly if we're thinking about Detroit property markets and real estate. So let's divide Detroit property markets and real estate into kind of three categories. One, two, we can just use both things. So in one way, what we can say is going on over here is kind of public housing. Public housing, low-income tax credit housing, anything that has some kind of subsidy involved, whether you're HUD, Section 8, or whatever. So this is its own category. We're not really going to talk about it. We could talk a bit, but that's one section of the market. This is prices going up, but this is the section of the market that you could think of where you can get a mortgage. We're not going to get a mortgage for under 60. It's hard to get one at 60, but we'll just leave it at 60. This includes all your new development, your condos, all of those other pieces. Everything that's going on, you've seen increased mortgages. We're going to leave this aside. We can talk about how that market functions and what we might want to do, but let's just say, let it go. Where we're really focusing most of our attention is in this middle area. That place where you can't get a mortgage, and that place where you probably qualify for this public housing or this subsidized housing, but you're on a waiting list, and there isn't enough. Right? So this is really the low-income housing market in Detroit. And what we've seen, if we go back to thinking about that graph of tax foreclosure and mortgage foreclosure, one of the things that happens in that time is most of your mom and pops, those people that we often hold up and say, hey, mom and pops are trying and working on the margins and doing what they can. They either went out of business or they got really big during the mortgage, during the crisis. One or the other. And what we also see, and somebody referenced this work earlier that we've done, is Fannie Mae decides to sell off almost all of their mortgage foreclosures in what they consider weak markets, Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, and everything else, to as-is sellers. So as-is sellers who are using portfolios bought in bulk, bought hundreds of properties. Hundreds, some of them have thousands. They're all over the country, a number of them in Detroit. What's the way that they end up getting rid of this property? Well, if it's really bad, you just let it go. And it goes right back into the tax, it goes into the tax foreclosure auction and we all pay to demolish it. If it's really good, you sell it really quickly because you bought it for $500 or $1,000. So you turn around and make that profit. But those ones in the middle, you either sell between each other, between wholesalers, or you start to sell to individuals on land contracts. Because they don't qualify for mortgages, they can't get into public housing, and what you often do is you price it just below market rent. So if the market rent is $700, this is the other thing. If you're poor and you're trying to rent in the city, it's not like there's a whole collection of cheap properties to rent. It's maybe $100, $150 off the average rent of wherever you're at. So it's expensive. So you have all those pieces. What you do is you price a land contract just under the market rent. You ask for a large down payment, probably 3 to 10 times what you paid for the house, $500. You get that money up front, everything that comes in after is gravy, and you put a clause in that contract that as soon as you miss a payment, it reverts to month to month. They file an eviction, out you go. You turn around and get the next person in, and you run that game until basically you can't find another person to put in the property. Right? So that's going on here. At the same time, this area right here is basically the center point of the city's demolition program. Right? So you have a large population in need of housing, and at the same time, as the city is not really investing in here. Because when we talk about affordable housing, that's really the range that we're talking about when we use these affordable housing programs. You can start picking loans and get a subsidized apartment in Brush Park with the salary that you have, because it uses the median income for the area, for the Tri-County area. But what's happening in this area is the actual supply, the number of properties is decreasing at the same time. And so people have fewer and fewer options to pick between, and they're generally having to deal with large-scale holders operating on predatory long land contracts in these areas. I'll touch on the last, and then we'll turn it over because I don't go too far or too long. But what I'll say is this: so we have this pipeline that's kind of developed, and that's what we spend a lot of our time looking at and work. Is that you have this foreclosure pipeline, enter bulk buyers, right? People buying in bulk, enter land installment contracts, and a number of other pieces and methods. The next result is an eviction or multiple evictions, right? I mean, one of the largest landholders and land contract operators in the city of Detroit turned his entire property portfolio of over 700 properties over 1.5 times in 5 years. So those are the kinds of eviction numbers that we're thinking about. And then after that, once the property has the value, it goes back into the auction, it becomes a public holding. And what we can tell you, based on the Auditor General report today and other reports we've done, is that in the last 5 years, the city has spent almost $63 million demolishing houses purchased by gold buyers out of foreclosure and eventually sent back into the public holdings. So this multi-million-dollar project that we have, right, has resulted in $63 million in public expenses beyond all of the money that's been taken from those people in land installment contracts. Now we were able to get lead exposure data from the state and the city of Detroit, and what we can tell you is that kids in Detroit that live in these properties, in which people are buying out of foreclosure markets and own 10 or more, are 1.8 times more likely to have elevated blood levels. On top of that, kids that are living next to 2 or more demolitions in the city, in their neighborhood, are twice as likely to have elevated blood levels. So there's a bunch of pieces going on with that. We can talk about the age of property, we can talk about conditions and all those other pieces inside of them. But the type of care and the type of use of these properties, the idea that you're milking them or pulling as much rent out of them without putting repairs in, increases the likelihood that children in Detroit will face lifetime issues because of their exposure to these types of hazards. So, I think that's all of it. The last place I would say is there are a number of groups and organizations working on this. Right? It's not some intractable problem that no one's aware of. There's lots of people working on it. But the interesting thing, because this is a law school in a place, is that I can tell you that all of those groups don't see law as a place in which you get justice or a place in which things happen. What the law is a way to buy time. Right? The ability to file cases buys you time to organize and do other pieces outside. So, and they have a number of lawyers that work in that way, but the expectation that the outcome will be anything in the favor of the tenant over the property owner is quite low. So, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Question?
What would be like one of your proposed solutions to get out of that cycle?
To get off that cycle?
Yeah.
So we have a report that we just did for Poverty Solutions called the Eviction Machine. It's out there, and we just list a number at the end. I mean, I would say the good news is we don't need a magic wand. The good news is we already have policies in place that would allow us to prevent a lot of this type of crime. We just don't do it. But the number one thing that we could do first is a moratorium on the Wayne County tax reform. Right? Just put a moratorium on it. Doesn't mean people don't have to pay taxes. Doesn't mean you can't charge them taxes. It just means in the period that you're trying to figure out how to stem the flow of these properties through these pipelines, where you're not selling any of these properties off. So that would be one easy way to kind of close the pipeline. The mortgage foreclosure pipeline is closed on its own. It's a very narrow amount of property at this point. But I would say that what becomes complicated in that is a lot of this exchange, this concentration of property, particularly low-income properties, has already happened. Right? So you're dealing with private actors with their own properties, and they have a lot of rights. So.
Who are these people who are buying these? Are these professional finance people? Or are they professional
Like,
landlords?
who are the both?
Yeah,
Or are they just opportunistic individuals with some cash flow?
All of the above. So what we see, basically you could say west of Mississippi. So almost all mortgage foreclosures that happen west of Mississippi, they're either sold to individuals or Fannie and Freddie package those and sold them to equity investors out of New York, like Blackstone and others, who turn them into rentals. So there's REO to rentals, is the category you find those under. You don't see as much of that in places like Detroit and Cleveland. That Fannie pipeline in weak markets was to basically as is buyers and as is sellers. So you see companies at the national level. You see companies like Harvard Portfolio or Vision, whose entire business model was to buy in bulk at about $500 a property from Fannie, and then to do land contracts. Locally, you see investors that were already in the property market increasing their holdings in bulk. And then you see different kinds of portfolio scams in some ways. We can't see inside of them, but they seem to be set up much like shells and pyramids, right? Where you basically, if you buy a share of our 40 properties in this portfolio, you'll get this percentage of return over time. But really, their ability to pay returns is dependent on them getting people to buy more shares and having more portfolios, right, to pay on. So there's a whole financial game that's existing kind of outside our general financial system.
So are these people that have knowledge of like landlord-tenant law, or are these just investors? It seems like there might be an avenue where people with knowledge of landlord-tenant law could fight back. It sounds like these are just financiers and not people with that specific knowledge.
So yes and no. A lot of them don't. What you see if you track like investor sites online, like message boards and things like that, is the sharing of ideas over time, and then coming to understand how to both comply in ways that don't bring attention to yourself, but also avoid compliance. The case in Detroit, right, there is a rental ordinance, there is attempts to enforce it, but it's been these kinds of things have been unenforced for decades. The city is under-resourced and incapacitated, and they're incredibly afraid to take on someone with deeper pockets because they're, one, they don't know if they're going to win, and two, if they lose,
I'm going to have to cut us there, but Professor Akers will be around, so I really encourage you to find him if you didn't get your question answered and you want to chat with him. Thank you so much.